Hello and welcome to another video with Average Guy's Garage. Well, today we're going to tackle a engine and transmission removal from this 2000 Toyota Corolla. It'll probably be a multi-part videos. The idea is to remove everything that we need to remove, and I created a checklist here. It's kind of hard to see that, but it is a 36-point checklist that I'm going to follow. So the idea here is disconnect what needs to be disconnected. There's 4 motor mounts. There's one there, one up front, one on the transmission, and one in the back. Couple things I'm going to try to do differently than I've seen is when I remove the AC compressor, it's down there, I'm going to try to keep that connected so I don't have to recharge the AC system. And secondly, back here where the exhaust manifold and the downpipe is, I'm going to try to keep that connected to the downpipe because it looks like it's a pretty straight fit on the engine there, and we'll just pull up and out. Of course, the radiator's got to come out, but by trying to leave the AC compressor connected, I'm going to leave the AC evaporator coil in. And what else here? Of course, some of the rough sticking points are the motor mounts are sometimes hard to get at. And secondly, since it's a front-wheel drive, these transaxles, I have to remove a 30mm hub nut on both sides, and I'm sure that's going to take a impact gun. Now, the reason we're doing this work is because the car has developed a condition in the last 3 months where it's slipping in reverse. When you put it into reverse from the automatic selector, you can hear it go into reverse, but it's not grabbing inside. So that tells me the solenoid, I think, is firing, but I think there's a band in there that keeps it, this doesn't have any friction anymore on it, or something's wrong with the band. What I've done is recently I replaced the filter and the gasket for the transmission pan and put new transmission fluid in, but that didn't help the problem at all. Still the same thing. It drives super powerful and forward, so we've got to just get this engine out with the transmission and take the transmission open and see if we can figure out what's going on. This is a daily driver, but this one's going to be down for about a week while we do this work. So just let me do a little rundown here. We're going to take out the battery, remove the alternator, thermostat housing, the AC compressor, disconnect the electrical over here, mass airflow, vacuum line stuff, remove the air filter box, the PVC hose from the throttle body, 2 coolant lines that connect to the throttle body, then remove the throttle body, take off the intake plenum, remove some other hoses, the brake booster and evap, disconnect the exhaust downpipe. Well, we're not going to probably do that, but we're going to remove the exhaust shield and loosen the bolts on the exhaust manifold studs. Then there's low pressure, high pressure power steering lines. Remove the power steering pump. Disconnect the wiring harness, and I'm going to be labeling those so everything goes back in the right place. Let's see here. Remove the starter. Disconnect the shift cable from transmission, shift cable bracket, fuel line, drain the engine oil and transmission, then remove the driver's side wheel, remove the axle nut, Move the steering knuckle out of the way and remove the CV shaft. Do the same thing on the passenger side. At that point, it should be, remove the bolts from the mounting points. Then remove the hood, raise the engine, and then see if we can figure out what's going on with that transmission. Repeat the process to put it back in. So that is what we're going to start today, and I'll show you progress along the way. Step 1 complete. The battery is out. There is a plastic battery tray below that just sits here. That's out. This is a welded part of the frame, and I can see through here it's sitting right on top of part of the transmission. So hopefully when this comes up, it can go that way a little bit and back a little bit to bypass that right there. 10mm bolts for the battery. 10mm wrench to get them out. Next step, we remove the serpentine belt and then take this alternator off. Okay, I've loosened the serpentine belt. It's a little hard to see, but from the passenger side there is a 19mm that's right here. Below is a 17mm, so if you're on that one, it's the wrong one. So it's a 19mm right here, and it pushes against this piston right here that causes the pressure for the belt. If you have a special tool like a extra long 20-inch zero offset, like this wrench has an offset, this side is not offset. If you have like a 20-inch or 18-inch 19mm no offset, that'd be easier, but I had to put that one there, lock that in, and push it to give me the leverage I needed, and it was pretty hard, but that was able then to get the belt off of the alternator. So that is step 2 complete. Next, I'll remove the alternator. This Toyota didn't have a serpentine belt label anywhere, so I went ahead and made one so I'll know how to get the belt back on. This is the crankshaft, the AC, alternator, power steering, and 2 idlers, one of which loosens the belt up. So if you don't have that diagram, make sure that you jot down a little picture of it. Alright, the alternator is out, and that gave me a little bit of grief. There was a bolt down here, 14mm, 12mm up here, and then this connector was a 12mm to take this nut off of this electrical connector right here. And then this was a pain. First, this connector just came right out, but this then was into the alternator casing to hold the cables, and it was just wasn't coming out until it got mangled. So I'll probably either replace this with something different when it goes back on, but this isn't going to go back on, and that's just part of this wiring harness that comes off later. So next step, the distributor housing here, thermostat housing, and of course that'll drain the radiator a bit. One thing I'm doing where possible is I am keeping the bolts with the item so they don't get lost. There's going to be a lot of bolts going around here pretty soon, so I'm trying to keep those with the components. Alright, I've unbolted the thermostat housing. It's two 12mm nuts on the top and bottom studs there. Well, the next step in the instructions was to remove the AC, but it's too difficult to get to the lower bolts of it with the radiator installed. So I'm going to take the radiator out first. There's a 12mm here and here holding it on, and then it's just loose after that. The lower hose here goes to the thermostat. I've removed the upper hose, but there's two more down here that have to come off. One, so I can point to it, this one right here goes underneath into the lower part of the radiator, and then there is another one next to it. It's a clip right there I'm pointing to. And those go to the transmission, so I think those are the lines to cool the transmission fluid. So I'll see if I can get those off, and then I should be able to get this radiator out. So in order to get to the lower transmission coolant lines and to remove them from the radiator, I'm going to take these two covers off underneath the car. There's 4 bolts that hold the front on, and then there's 2 screws that go into a plastic grommet that hold the back, and I believe it's the same on the other side. Then I'll have access to the transmission lines, and I can get that radiator out and then move on to the air conditioning, at least getting that unbolted from the engine. So once the air conditioning is out, the next step will be moving over to this side, taking off these filter box, throttle body, and then we'll move on from there. So I've been working on it for about an hour and a half at this point, and have gone through 6 steps of 36. This is the passenger side panel. These are 10mm all the way around, including those screws. This is what the side looks like with that driver side panel off. You have good access to the transmission shift lever here, transmission pan. Yesterday I replaced a filter in an attempt to see if that was going to help with the reverse problem, but it didn't help. So I had to replace the filter. Then I replaced the gasket as well, and 4 quarts of transmission fluid that now has to be replaced again. So we'll get to removing this panel. Here's the hose I'm going to take off here from the radiator. The other one's on this side right here. That's also going to help me later. This is the front engine mount right here. Alright, both of the transmission lines are now released from the radiator. Should be able to go up top and take the radiator out. Let's see that the radiator has these 2 little rubber bearings here that fit it to the bottom of the frame, bottom of the frame. So when it goes back in, it sits nice, and then you only have to hold it from the top with those two brackets. So go up top, see if I can take the radiator out now. Okay, the radiator came out okay, and that opened up a lot of space in the cavity here. May have to remove this bottle, not one of the steps on my list. And there's the AC compressor. I think there's just one bolt here and the two bolts on the bottom. Has this flex hose right here. There's a wiring connector. And then there's the return here. But I'm just hoping I can move that out of the way and support it somehow, because I don't want to lose the AC and have to get that recharged, or however they do it, they have to dry it out and recharge it. That'll add some expense that I don't want to take. Maybe I'll leave that for the last. We'll see what we can do after this. Maybe we'll leave the AC because this is the last step over here. Then we'll move over, take other things off on this right hand side, driver's side. Okay, so now I'm over on the driver's side and I've disconnected this connector here. It has a green ring and two connections. And this lower one, it has 5 connections. Went right here. So now I'm going to take off this air filter cover, this, and then we'll see what we can do from there. Trying to clear up this whole area here for the start of lifting it up. Okay, I've removed the filter and the cover to the filter. The next is taking the filter base out. It has some connections right here. It's got one, just got a little red topper thing here. So I might be able to take this bolt out and just move this over, take these off later. So it has this green one here. It goes to the lower, and the red one, then this one that goes to the engine goes to the top. And it has an electrical connector back here as well. And the filter box had a couple of more bands here to loosen in order to get some cables out of the way, and then the box came off. So now we have access to the motor mount on this side that mounts to the transmission. And this is a pretty rust-free car. You can see I've seen a couple videos where these were just corroded. Hopefully that'll be easy enough to take off with an impact wrench. Okay, so now I'm just trying to disconnect some more. This is a cable that goes to the body as a ground, and it connects into this cable. It goes over to the negative of the battery. So I'll just disconnect it from here off the transmission. And then I want to take this off the throttle body, and then I'll have to disconnect this we'll have to disconnect this cable here, throttle cable. What else? Well, we'll just disconnect what we can, but once we get a lot of this disconnected in here, we're going to take off that intake. Alright, the throttle body is off. Presently it is just sitting right here out of the way. And now I'm moving on to the intake manifold. There is a bracket right here holding this cable I took off. It goes here and here. And there's another bracket right here that holds the radiator hose that connects to the intake manifold here. So I'm going to remove that bracket, leave it attached here so we can take that off. So the manifold is ready to come off, but there are a couple of additional hoses back here. Looks like 3 of them. Get these 2 off. See if I can pull it away enough to get the bottom one. Okay, the intake manifold is off. You can see in there, see the valves. Talk about some carbon buildup. That's what they talk about. And then of course here is the gasket that will have to be replaced with a new one. Alright, on to the next step, which is going to be brake booster and evap, and then start working on the downpipe. Some reason in the instructions it says to remove the starter. I don't think I need to remove the starter in order to lift out the engine, but I do got to figure out what to do with that AC. Hopefully I can unbolt that and just move it over to the left out of the way. There's still a lot of electrical connections that have to come off and pushed out of the way. But I have pretty easy access to the engine mounts. There's one here, one there, one there, and then there's one back here that's below that shield for the exhaust. Okay, I'm starting to disconnect the wiring harness. I've got it off the 4 fuel injectors, and there's a bracket right here holding this on. I don't want to, I could cut it and just redo it, but let's take the bracket off with it. So that's right there. And we'll take the connections off the coil pack, see how much we can move out of the way. And I think we might call it a day. It's getting dusk and the mosquitoes are out in force. Okay, well, we're going to call it quits right there for part 1. Also remove the washer reservoir. It was cracked on the top and sloshing out, so I'm going to try to get another one of those from the recycle yard. About on step 15 now, out of 36.